Get going here. By the way, these are two of our dogs. This is obviously Aspen, and that's Luke. That's our reactive dog, and they're having a French moment. So I figured it was good to put Luke up on there because he's a reactive dog, and he still can be a reactive dog. But that's what we're supposed to be talking about over the next 9 hours. So you know that next week is actually this week. Next week's class will be this coming Saturday at 11 o'clock. Okay? They're having an event here on the following day at 2 o'clock on Sunday, so if anybody wants to come to that, you can go to that. But that's why we changed that, because of the conflict. All right, that didn't work. Okay, so I'm calling this the overreactive dog because every dog reacts to a certain extent, right? And I see usually 6 or 7 consults a week, something like that. And by and large, probably 3/4 of them are with dogs that have overreactivity issues. Because they're embarrassing dogs. You go for anybody here have a reactive dog? Yeah, okay. They are embarrassing, aren't they? Because, I mean, you're walking along and all of a sudden they start to explode and you're going, now what do I do? That's the most often question I'm asked, is what do I do when he explodes? And my answer is usually, don't let it happen. You know, do something beforehand. But, of course, we all know that stuff happens. You know, eventually the dog will do it, and that'll be that. So we'll be talking mostly about leash reactivity, but it'll encompass a few other things, and certainly I have to say that most of the time a dog that's overreactive has other issues as well, so we're not talking about anything that's in a vacuum. It's all part of a continuum. I've just been reading a little bit. There's a new study out, or a new report out that says, lo and behold, dogs have, not even dogs, animals have emotions. Who knew?
What's the date on this?
I was going to send it to everybody. I thought, this is crazy, you know. First of all, when Darwin first was writing, he absolutely indicated that animals had emotions. All animals had emotions, including things like crabs and snails and whatnot. But then science decided, no, that can't be. And you know the reason why is because the behaviorists in the 1950s and 60s, this is one of the reasons. The Cartesians started it. They said no other animals except people have emotions. But the scientists said, but behaviorists said, since you cannot see an emotion and you cannot actually measure an emotion, we're just going to forget that they exist. Because we can't do anything scientifically with them. So if you can't do anything scientifically with them, then, you know, by all means, just close your eyes and assume that they don't exist. So, you know, that's one of those things. So essentially, people who have reactive dogs ask questions like, why can't my dog play in dog parks? Oh, I had 2 of those this week on the same day. By the time I got to the second one, I'm like, you don't need to go to dog parks! No, I was really, really nice to him. And I don't think I convinced him. I really don't think I convinced him. Because this particular dog goes to dog park. It's a Formosan mountain dog. It's a dog from Taiwan. And it's actually one of the least fearful Taiwanese dogs I've ever met, which is really cool. He's a very nice dog. He's got some fear. They all do, but he goes to a dog park and he says, well, 50% of the time he's really great. I said, you know, that's really not a very good percentage. You know that. You know, so, and he apparently is worse in the afternoon dog park play than he is in the morning. And I said, how about just cutting out the afternoon? And he goes, well, my partner really likes to take him in the afternoon. And I said, well, yeah. The dog actually does like to play, but doesn't like German Shepherds. Or intact males, or puppies. Small issues like that. So other things that people always want to do with their dogs, and they envision themselves. You know, you get a dog and you envision yourself. It's like when I had my child. I envisioned that we were going to be walking long trail walks with my kid and everything was going to be wonderful. And she hates it. she did. She liked it better now. She's 30, but you know, but when she was a kid, she didn't want to go on a walk. Oh, for crying out loud! So that was, you know, what you envision doesn't necessarily come to fruition at all. So people would like to meet other dogs when they're walking down the street. In fact, I would say that there have been some studies, and we all know it's true, that a lot of times people use dogs as vehicles to meet other people. And it's a legitimate vehicle. You know, you go for a walk on the beach, you have a Aussie, somebody else has an Aussie mix, you get talking, you know, and then you become friends, and you meet there every week or something like that. So it's a legitimate thing to do, but the problem is that some dogs are not able to do it. One of the things that happens that you probably already know is that when you stop moving, your dog gets worse. I mean, I think they're like little kids. They're going, rah, 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 rah. You know, I think that the dogs are like kids. They need to have constant stimulation when they're walking, or fairly consistent stimulation, and so otherwise they start to get themselves into trouble. So a lot of people in Marin County want dogs to go with them to coffee shops. I've had no end of people that I've seen in consults who say, well, I was sitting with them at the coffee shop, and as a dog or as another person went by, they lunge at a leg, you know, and I don't like that, so how can I stop it? And of course my answer, don't go to coffee shops, or go to coffee shops on your own, so you can actually enjoy yourself instead of going, is he all right? Is everything okay? You know, he's underneath there. Is he growling there? What's going on? And then, of course, greeting and playing with dogs that come to visit. There is a high degree of territoriality in all dogs. So, you know, people invite people over with their dogs because they've got a friendly dog, and all of a sudden there's a dog fight because there's a bone there or whatever. And, you know, this kind of thing happens all the time, even with really nice dogs. I think back to some sheer luck that I had when years ago I had 2 Rottweilers and a Belgian Tervuren, and we used to have people bring their dogs over all the time, and all the dogs were fine. And just thinking about this now, that was kind of the luck of the ignorant, because I didn't know enough about territoriality to realize what could go wrong, especially because I would have them even meet at the gate, you know. So now I would never do that. Ignorance is bliss. No, it really is. So people want to know, and I was talking about behaviorists earlier. One of the things about behaviorists is the applied animal behaviors, or not even the applied animal behaviors, I would say just the really clinical behaviors, is they say, since you can't know why something is going to happen, don't ask why. So when we first at APDT, we started getting talks by people who were clinical behaviorists. And, you know, dog trainers are like dog owners. We all want to know why a dog is doing something. Why is this dog unhappy? Why is this dog happy? Why is this dog barking and lunging? Why is this dog doing whatever? And the behaviorists would all say, since you cannot measure it, it is not important. And there are still some people who say that because that's the training that they had. And yet, I would say the vast majority of people want to know why their dog does something. Don't you think? I mean, I know I certainly do. I really want to know why. Then there's always the dog that does what one of the dogs I saw yesterday. He goes up to another dog, everything seems fine, and you count to 3, and then there's a fight. You know? And again, this guy says, why is the dog doing that? And my feeling about why a dog does something is they kind of go, hi, Maribel. Oh, and then I go, oh, don't know you? I don't know you. Oh my God, I don't know you! I think it takes sometimes 3 seconds for a dog to go, I don't know you. You know how long it takes dogs to get to know each other, right? They kind of do this, and then this, and then this, because they're doing all this smelling. And for a dog, sometimes they get really tense because they're too close. So they're really too close. Why do they sit underneath things and snark at other dogs? Because they can. Because that's a defendable spot. It's like, why do they defend doorways? Defendable spot. Nice, easy place to defend. So that's why they do it. And why do they guard toys and food from other dogs? I don't know. Why don't we let other people drive our car? Why don't we let other people come and sit and take our food when we're at a restaurant? You know, that's a funny thing also. It's kind of like dogs are expected to be better people than people. There's a higher standard for dogs than there are for people. No, you can't resource guard. Well, they can't do that. Just take it away from him. You know, or they can't have opinions about another dog. And sure they can. They can have lots of opinions about dogs, and they always do. So aggression, of course, is not very, true aggression is actually pretty rare. But aggressive display, that is very, very common indeed. And it's always been like that. It's a natural behavior. I think that many people have different levels of aggression. Some people have a really easy trigger. You know, they get triggered by something very quickly and easily, whereas other people are much harder to get angry. Actually, let me ask you, just a quick show of hands, how many of you guys have a quick temper, a sharp temper? One?
Depends.
Two?
Yeah. Without doing it, is it a delay or the?
No, I fairly, no delay, just a really quick temper. Maybe. Well, just something that happens that really irritates you, like you can't open a jar. You know? Yeah, okay. So, whereas there are some people who kind of fly off the handle a little bit, even, you know, nothing horrible. And there are other people who just keep on working on it and working on it. And I tend to not fly off the handle very much, which drives my partner crazy because she does. when it's a computer issue. When it's anything else, it's not a problem. When it's a computer issue, she's like, I'm throwing it away, you know. And I go, no, I'll fix it. I'll make it okay. So anyway, there are higher expectations for people, and there are a lot more dogs these days. We were talking about that before class. There are a lot of dog professionals now, but there are also a lot of places for dog professionals to go, because there are a lot of jobs that we can do to help people with their dogs. And again, we have higher expectations. Doggy daycare is one of those expectations that's really interesting. People think all dogs should like to go to doggy daycare and enjoy it, and of course not all of them do. People think that all dogs should get along with one another, and if they don't, there's something wrong probably with your dog, not with my dog. You know, there's something wrong with your dog, or maybe the owner. I mean, anybody who's had a reactive dog gets yelled at. Even if it's not very often, you still get yelled at every once in a while. Usually it's something along the lines of, why don't you train that dog? You know, control your dog. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people get yelled at for that just because they think that all dogs are as friendly as their dogs, you know. We have somebody in our neighborhood who has 2 labs that are just the sweetest, nicest dogs in the world, but they meet an awful lot of dogs who are not. And those dogs are nice, but they're not under control. So it goes back to the nature of dogs and our expectations. So I think one of the things that I was trying to tell this person yesterday, and that I know we've probably all tried to tell people, is that adult dogs are pack members, they are family members. They are bonded to a certain group. They will always stay bonded to that group. They will not intend to bond to anybody else. They will defend the members of that group, which I think dog walkers actually run into occasionally. If you have the same group that you're walking with, and then another dog comes in, those dogs will have a tendency to pack up against that other dog. And so you have to be fairly careful in your integration. What do you do?
I don't go near dogs, and if I see anybody coming near me, because I'm not there to, like, I'm not, in the group setting, I'm not there hired to socialize these dogs.
Yeah.
So I have people like, oh, can my dog meet your dog? I'm like, no, I'm sorry, we're just going to go, you know, I don't let people, you know.
So what do you do if you have a new dog that you're going to be, do you walk one dog at a time, or do you walk?
I have a small group right now of 3, and so what I do is I get that dog and I introduce each dog separately. And I've had one situation where 2 of the dogs seemed to get along, and then the tiniest dog was really snarky at the new dog, and then I ended up actually walking the tiny dog separately.
So walking them separately.
And and she just she didn't care about other dogs at all. She's 13.
Yeah.
But I just never let them meet other dogs or people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's not your job, as you say. Your job is to exercise the dogs. What about you?
If it's a narrow trail and we can't avoid the other pack, I start running and I call my dogs and
Just keep on running past?
as fast as possible. Yeah, that's what you have to do. You
That's actually a good one.
Hiding.
Yeah.
I do go behind
Oh,
cars.
cars are
all
wonderful.
the time.
There are great places to hide. Of course, there can also be a cat under there. You could train your dog to run away from a dog and go, oh, look, there's a cat. So they actually think that there's something under there that might be interesting.
That is cool.
I hope no cat owner is going to. I never want to. No, don't want to hurt a cat. Okay. So all dogs also defend the territory where they live. They will also defend the territory where they don't live, as in a car. Many dogs are car territorial. I still think that our dogs must think we are magic. You get into a car and then suddenly you're somewhere else. Because they don't have that capacity to think of, they certainly don't invent cars or whatever. So they take it for granted after a while, but that's one of the reasons why walking in a different location other than your house is a good idea, because you've just gone off to somebody else's territory. And that's a really good thing. So, and it's good for our dogs to think we're magic, right? Somebody needs to. And if our dogs do, there's good. So as an adult dog, and that usually is a dog over the age of about 3, there are many dogs, particularly certain breeds, that think of everybody else as being a suspect. So somebody else is a stranger and therefore not a trustworthy individual. And I think that is it's a really important consideration when we're trying to work with reactive dogs, is that you're probably not going to get any of the dogs that you're working with that are reactive. You're not going to get any of them to suddenly go, oh, I love all other dogs. And yet, clients or friends or whatever who are pretty naive about dogs, that's what they want you to do. Down at the bottom of my intake form it says, what are your goals for your dog? And they usually say to eliminate the aggression and have my dogs be friends with all other dogs. I go, okay, that's a really nice long-term goal. That's so long-term that, we might be nearing death before you actually get to that. Huh?
Kumbaya singing.
Kumbaya singing, yeah. There's I think on the Marine Humane Society intake form it says now, the other question is, what can you live with? Right? And I think that's a good question. What can you live with?
That goes for people and dogs.
What's
That
that?
goes for dogs and people.
And people,
What can
yeah.
you live with?
Yeah, what can you live with? So most puppies, on the other hand, and a puppy could be, you figure a puppy is probably until about 6 months old. Most puppies will actually approach everybody. They think everybody's their friend. Puppies that have gone through puppy class think everybody's their friend and they can maul everybody. Puppies that have lived with adult dogs, several adult dogs, don't believe that. They know better than that. But they still are friendly. They still want to meet other dogs. I remember years ago, when I had the Rotties, we were evaluating a puppy, and it was a really naughty puppy, probably about 10 weeks old, and it was biting people hard, and he would lose his temper really badly. So if you held him like this, he would start going, and really throwing a tantrum and whatnot. And I put him down in my office with all 3 of the big dogs there. And he crawled up to each of the dogs, and this is a puppy that's this big, and each of the Rotties was like 120 pounds. So he'd crawl up to a Rottweiler, and one of the Rotties would go, and he'd roll away, like, roll away. And then he'd do it again. He'd start crawling up to the next dog, and they'd growl at him, and he'd roll away. And Ariel, my turf, she didn't growl. She would just kind of go, but the same thing would happen. He'd roll away. And he kept doing that, and for a half an hour, he kept going up to the assistants who were there, they said, why is he doing that? Why does he keep trying? He's been rejected. Why does he keep trying? And it's because of the pack instinct. It is so strong. It is almost impossible to fully reject a puppy. They will always come back at you. So, when you have a puppy that does a lot of biting of people, And you're always trying things like screaming or squealing or whatever, and the puppy just comes right back and does it again. And the reason is because the drive, the instinct to form a society is so strong that you cannot undo that. So that, and there's a good and a bad to that. The good part is that they form a good society. The bad part is once that society is formed, they don't necessarily, depending on the temperament, want everybody else coming into that society. So, yeah.
So what do you do? So I volunteer with a puppy play group, and there's a little bulldog, and she is exactly like what you just said. Exactly. They try to put her harness on. She's and she goes up to all the other dogs. Of course, they're all puppies. There's no adult dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So she does get corrected sometimes. She, like, what do you
Comes
do?
right back at it.
She comes right back at the other puppies, and they end up doing a lot of breaks for her, and,
This is a play group?
this is a puppy play group.
Do you have very much influence?
I would say no. There's a trainer who runs it, but, I mean, they're good about separating and not letting it continue.
The puppy should not be in class.
She should not be there. Okay.
No. The puppy should be only with adult dogs,
Okay,
not with other puppies.
okay.
And there should be really some very strong strictures on what the dog can get away with, because those behaviors get worse.
She's a boss, or she's
Yeah.
gonna be climbing
No,
on
she's
everybody.
an English bulldog.
Oh.
Is she an English bulldog?
Yeah, she's an English bulldog.
Well, the other thing is this is just as an experiment. When you're there, try petting her on top of your head and see if she tries to bite you.
Okay.
Not your head, her head.
Okay, I
Her
understand.
Because what I found with English bulldogs is that triggers a bite reflex. Just that petting on top of the head, and they go up like this and they start biting. So it makes it actually worse. Anything right on top of their head. It'd be interesting if you let me know,
I will.
because I'd like to know. Yeah.
So it seems like puppies are going to be sort of more affiliated with other dogs, potentially, or assertive in this case. But then they hit a transition in their development where things change. So a person who has a puppy that is suitable and they can take it out in public and it gets along with other dogs, eventually transitions to a dog that says, hey, I don't want to meet all these dogs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So then in our consults at the Humane Society, we often have these people who are like, my dog became aggressive, or my dog became this, or became that.
Yes, I know that. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess, I mean, it's an observation, right? But it's also begs the question for people who are trying to figure out how to get the dog of their dreams, getting a puppy and doing all the right things as a puppy doesn't necessarily lead you right to the adult dog. And this is partly me thinking through my own wish list. Someday I want a normal dog, right? Normal dog, meaning the dog that I can go hiking with, all the wish list, right? Because I don't have that, but anyway, so the idea of like what are the steps that I can do to achieve maximum success, or how can I help just people who ask the questions when they know you're a dog person? Everyone asks.
Okay, so that's a really, really good question. So, does anybody else want to keep going with that question? Because I really think that's a good question. I think this is, you've just gone into the realm of only Tricia's opinions. Okay? I honestly think that what we consider appropriate socialization is not. And this is kind of half-formed stuff, so you can question all you want to with it. I remember, I'm getting pretty old now, right? So I've had dogs for so many years. And back when I first had dogs, we didn't do much in the way of socialization. Puppy classes started at 6 weeks. No, at 6 months. They didn't start at 4 months. And you started out, what you were trying to do is actually get the dogs to pay more attention to the owner than they were to the other dogs, which is what a level 1 class should be, is to try to get the dogs to pay attention to the owners rather than to other dogs. And I think over what they learned, because we didn't have nearly the amount of leash reactivity. We had some, for sure, but there really wasn't nearly as much. Now, you can say, okay, there's more dogs now, so we don't know. Also, there's more rescue dogs now. So there's a lot of stuff that could be influencing this that has nothing to do with the way you raise a puppy. But what I think we did is we taught puppies to mind their own business. We taught dogs when they were young to mind their own business. So we could walk by another dog and they didn't think they had to go visit with the other dog. The owners didn't think they had to go visit with the other dog. I could take my dogs, and I don't know if other people had the same thing, I could take my dogs to the beach and they would just pretty much ignore every other dog. It'd be like they'd kind of going, hi, and then they just keep on going. I had all these enormously huge, powerful dogs who didn't do a thing to other dogs. So I think what we taught them was that the pack is really important and that I'm going to take care of you and don't worry about those other animals. Now, again, it didn't work all the time, nor did everybody do it. But when Ian Dunbar came around, he's going, socialization is so important, and he has really good ideas, you know, where that dog needs to get high levels of exposure to other dogs and high levels of exposure to people because he wanted to prevent fear-based behavior. But is that necessarily, you know, I think fear-based behavior is not good, obviously, and I think some socialization is good. I just think that the focus that I had years ago with our dogs was a different focus than what's going on now. People now think that dogs are children, should play with other dogs. They think they should get along with all other dogs. You know, all the things that I've just been talking about. So I think it was just in the way that we funneled the behavior that we're working on. Yeah?
And isn't there a parallel between how we treated kids 30 and 40 years ago as compared to now, where kids were free-range kids? You open the door and come back for lunch, come back for dinner.
Yeah.
Dogs would go out the door. And
They learned how to function themselves. But even that, you know, 30, 40 or whatever it was, we were free-range kids. Come back at 5 o'clock for dinner. You know, that's what you did. But that's a little bit different from what I was talking about as an adult. We couldn't let our dogs out and go, but we didn't have the focus on them being with other dogs and playing with other dogs. Yeah.
Okay, so then just to go back to this whole concept, the idea of getting a puppy so you know what you're getting and you create, right? Because this is the theory, right? If I get it as a puppy, then I can shape it into the dog that I want it to be.
You've got children.
Oh, no, I don't. No, my point is, I guess my point is, because that's what a ton of people think, even my husband.
Okay.
The idea that, like, the more I'm learning, the more I'm thinking, I'm going to just have to get an adult dog.
It's the luck of the draw.
So I love puppies, but it doesn't mean that having a puppy is going to have anything to do with having the same dog I got and the same dog I end up with. Because once they go through adolescence and maturity and into adulthood, they're going to have their own opinions, they're going to make their own choices and say, you know, what I tolerated at this stage of my life is not what I'm going to necessarily tolerate at that
I think understanding life stages is really important.
Okay.
And understanding that I know people, you know, like, particularly we get a lot of mixes now, but breed predisposition does have a great deal to do with an adult temperament. If you get a German Shepherd, the chances are that as he becomes an adult, he will become more vigilant. He will become a little bit more pessimistic about the way the world is going to go. And, you know, he might be a bit barky when he sees something he doesn't like. So that's just kind of what happens when you get a German Shepherd. If you get a pit bull, the chances are that as he becomes an adult, he's going to have a fairly short temper. And if something happens and another dog bowls into him the way he didn't want him to, he may very well lose it. So those are things that, I mean, certainly not all German Shepherds, Strider wasn't like that, and not all pit bulls are like that. But you kind of get an idea of a breed predisposition. So you get a mutt, and especially because, you know, you don't know what's in the mutt, you think it's this, but it's not. Then you have to look for signs of stability. But I do think you can shape the dog's behavior if you prevent the dog from having any horrible, you know, any kind of trauma, any kind of traumatic event that you know about. If you really, really encourage the primary relationship, that is the right relationship between you and the dog or between your family and the dog. And the secondary relationships are just that. They're secondary. They're certainly there, people come over, say hello, all that kind of stuff. But it's like when dogs are, when we were talking about in the anxiety course, when people are, when they have an anxious dog, one of the first things you do for those dogs is you take away the door duties, right? You pull them away from the door, you tell them, you go put them in a back room and you say, you'll come out when you're quiet and then you can meet my guests. So what have I just said? My guests. So taking some of that responsibility away from the dog and not taking them to a dog park where they have to figure out who's the nice dog and who's the nasty dog and who's intact and who's this and who's that. I mean, I think that those are really, really important. So yes, you can. If you pick a stable dog, if you pick a dog what you believe is stable. So we have 2 German Shepherd type puppies right now at our house, which have diarrhea. They both seem to be very stable. Really, I mean, they take correction well. They are very cheerful, very happy, very friendly, very outgoing. And I would happily adopt them out to somebody who was fairly cognizant of what a German Shepherd is likely to be when he becomes an adult. But I think that you're starting with the clay you're starting with there is pretty good clay, as opposed to a puppy that's really fearful. What's interesting with them, though, is they're just starting to go into the fear imprint period. It was really, I was playing with them yesterday, and I took something, what was it? I don't know, it was something with a different shape, and I put it up to the puppy's face, and he went, oh, just coming in, because yesterday he would not have, or day before yesterday, it would have been fine.
How old is he?
Well, we thought they're about 6 weeks old, so he's probably pushing 7 weeks old now. They're very large.
Those kind of genetic breed-related characteristics, like fear, vigilance, and the German Shepherd, or Doberman, or whatever, about when in, say, the perfect puppyhood or the blank slate, about what's the range you start seeing those?
You usually start seeing about 7 months.
7 months?
Somewhere around 7 months, in my experience, and again, this is all opinion by Trish, right? In my experience, about 7 months, you're going to start seeing some of the behaviors. Now, sometimes it's later, but I think that's when I start seeing it. That's certainly when my turf started getting wiggy and nervy-turvy. But it's also when a lot of other dogs start to do that as well.
And does that coincide with them?
That's another fear period.
Does that coincide with them also coming into heat if they're not?
No, I don't think so. No, they get grumpy when they come into season. PMS, That they actually don't, not necessarily. Some of them do.
I was thinking about just talking about the transition, and you're talking about the primary relationship, and what I see with the reactive dogs I work with is there's no impulse control. I mean, one of them is like this bully, and I think she's OCD or not saying this, but no impulse control. Never, like, I work so much on impulse control with them, so much on getting them to check in with me, getting them, like, the environment is very stimulating, of course, but working a lot, and I see that with every single reactive dog that I've worked with.
Yeah.
They do not pay attention to you, and I understand part of that is like the scanning, is there another dog and everything, but it's.
Oh yeah, you'll see. We're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
Because impulse control is something that, again, one of the things that a lot of classes don't pay much attention to. And certainly a lot of owners don't necessarily pay much attention to.
But it's a pretty important thing, right?
It's very important.
Very crucial.
Yeah, it's absolutely very, very important. And I don't know, I think, when classes a long time ago, we used to do a lot of stays, and I don't know, do you guys teach classes, or do you work on stay a lot?
More ways,
Like a set 5-minute downstay?
a little bit. The
Oh.
concept of it, but not necessarily.
The concept, because you're probably counting on them to do it at home. And how many of you actually have taken a class? And if you have taken a class, how often have you practiced? You do not have to answer that. Because it's hard to keep the practice up. So puppies, compared to adults, they will approach novel objects. They'll keep on trying to form a relationship, even if there's no relationship there. They're just going to keep on trying. But shy puppies don't. Shy puppies have to be taken special care of because they do not want to approach novelty. So if you were going to be choosing a puppy, that's the first thing I'd probably shy away from, is a pup that has problems with novel objects. You know, if you put a strange looking thing in the middle of a room and the dog gets all like, woo, 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 or starts running in circles around it or backs into a corner or whatever, and you want an easy dog, you probably would start going away from that dog. You probably, that's not exactly, now if you really like dogs that need a lot of work, you probably would be right here. then you would, you know, then you would choose that. If you have children, you probably wouldn't choose that, would you? But the vast majority of the people who want to get a puppy, they get worried. I mean, the puppy is scared, and so then they feel sorry for the puppy, and and the puppy goes into their arms, and all of a sudden you've got a new dog. That's why in my book I said the most important thing about choosing a puppy is not choosing the first one you see. And I would say probably very few people actually follow that advice. Overly assertive puppies don't have any built-in caution at all, and they can be very problematic because they're going to end up probably causing damage to themselves by being too assertive with an adult dog, unless you can make the pup, you know, give the pup some good adult dogs to hang around with. That is one of the best things about when we do puppy raising, you know, when we have fosters, is our adult dogs will tell the puppies off, and we can tell about resilience really quickly. Heather, who's a dog that we got in December, who had 4 puppies that were really cute, and she's a little short-legged dog, she hates these puppies. She hates them. So if they come up to her, she's like, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we're almost as big as you are. And she's like, no, I am da bitch. And she really is. So lack of socialization is certainly part of puppy stuff, but mostly it's genetics, I would say. There has been more studies on epigenetics, and certainly if the mom was not socialized and then the puppies are born, they have a lot of catching up to do. You know, they have to, and I think what we should probably start doing, which I probably won't do, is start calling socialization habituation. Because it really is that, isn't it? It's getting used to the world. It's not, because people think of socialization as puppy classes or puppy groups or whatever. And that certainly is part of it, but habituation is getting used to the world they're living in. You know, if they're going to live in San Francisco, you better take them around San Francisco. If they're going to live in Sebastopol, you've got to take them around Sebastopol, you know. So as puppies age, their behavior changes. Adolescent dogs retain their sociability level for a while, but they change in certain ways. Like some of them get more assertive and bossy. Think of teenage kids, right? They are who they are, but they become more hormonal. And when they become more hormonal, you get different behaviors. So they get more prickly and reactive at times, or they get more submissive and shy. So they become kind of more of who they are. Did you want one of these chairs?
No.
You're all right in that thing? Okay. So this is an interesting thing that I'm trying to think of. Myrna Milani she's a veterinary behaviorist, and I really like her. She's got, I think her website is just myrnamilani.com or myrnamilani.org, and it's MYRNAMILANI. Very sensible, very realistic person. And she did I think she did a seminar at Marin Humane Society several years ago, and I still remember it well because didn't have any slides, was just talking, and she was so good. But she talked about the fact that most real aggression begins in adolescence. So you will see the beginning of problems at about a year to a year and 3 months of age. You start to really see that happen. This is one of the reasons why Bad Rap used to not put up dogs for adoption, or didn't recommend dogs for adoption until they were over a year and a half. Because by that time you can usually tell if they're going to be good dogs. I don't know if they still do that. But the other thing that used to happen, speaking of Malinois, is that, you know, for breeds like Malinois or other dogs like that are such high, really difficult dogs, they used to cull a lot more of them. So if they had a dog that didn't have a good temperament or they perceived that that was a bad temperament, they would cull it. But they don't do that now. That would probably earn them a place in hell.
And somebody was telling me who lives in Merced County that that's what used to happen, right?
Yeah.
But now they're all ending up in Milan.
Yes, of course.
And they're ending up in Barry. And
Yeah.
I believe it. You know, that the ranchers used to just know.
Right.
There's 11 puppies. These 3.
You're not going to be able to. Yeah, you're not going to be able to keep them all.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, and the part of me that is very practical says it's probably a good practice, and the part of me that's a dog lover goes, "Oh, you can't do that." You know. So I understand not doing it, but at the same time, you get a dog that's a really difficult breed, and you try to find somebody who is appropriate to own that dog can be very hard. I mean, Malinois used to only be owned by people who either did like Schutzhund, breed sports, or police officers, and now they're all over the place, and people have no idea what kind of machine gun they have, and they definitely have that. So, real adolescence is caused by a combination of genetics and experience. So if you have taken your 5-month-old puppy to a dog park and the puppy gets attacked by another dog, that puppy is going to remember it because he doesn't have anything else to remember. He doesn't have. I mean, you know, he's only 5 months old. He's got to put that in his memory banks. He's not going to have 3 years of benign things to happen. So this is he's going to remember that. It always amazes me how people say, well, I take my dog to a dog park or whatever, and yes, they got attacked, but there was no injury. Yeah, okay, so that means that it's no physical injury, but there could easily be a mental injury. The other thing that's interesting, and this is totally off topic, is that people who their dog gets attacked by a dog that is predatory, you know, who goes up to the back and does a kill bite, and they go, but there was no blood. Do you know how they kill animals? Shit, they break their neck. There's no blood.
Yeah.
They just so yeah. Just because there's no blood doesn't mean there's no injury. Those things are really important to remember. So some types of dogs tend to retain sociability into adulthood. That would be generally dogs that are used for sport and have to be among other dogs in the sport. So that's why you get the Labrador, the retrievers. You know, they have a tendency to be pretty social all their lives. They're also the hunting, the sporting labs and the sporting Goldens are not easy to own because they have enough energy for about 15 or 20 dogs. So those types of dogs are the Spaniels and the Retrievers have a tendency to be pretty social all their lives. And what else might be social all their lives? Pugs? It's an interesting one. Some pugs are, but I've seen some pretty not social pugs. I can't even tell you. A lot of the companion dogs are not. They're much more closely allied with people. Mm-hmm. And they don't actually like other dogs all that much.
How about King Charles?
They like everything. They've bred their brains out there. I actually have seen one UD, utility degree cavalier. It's a miracle. It's wonderful. So what about terriers? No, right? No, they're not like that. So we're talking sporting dogs and a few of the small companion dogs which have a tendency to be social all their lives, and all the rest of the dogs don't.
So maybe like remember we were talking about the Chesapeake?
Ugh.
I talk to other people who like breed them and stuff. They're like they don't like other dogs.
No, they are not. They're not nice dogs. Their Chesapeakes actually are kind of a combination of a Mastiff and a they're very, very territorial. Yeah. And they are very prickly, and they often are human aggressive. So you have to be very careful with that breed.
Why do people get them then?
Why do they get things like wolves?
I don't know. It's just
because Chessies are amongst the best retrievers in the world. They are driven. They are fantastic hunters, just absolutely stupendous hunters.
Like bad condo dogs.
But they're not very good condo dogs, no. So if you were going for that, but I have to say most people, they get them because they have a nice curly coat and they're funny, they're mud colored. Because their colors are mud and grass what else? There's 3 different colors, but they're called mud and grass. So,
See, I know people because it's a retriever.
yeah, and they think it's a retriever.
Root it in that and think, oh, well, they're like a lab.
Yeah, yeah, and they're just not. They are highly suspicious of almost everybody, and so they were used in the Chesapeake Bay for guarding boats. So they were, and they're water dogs. So they're really, really water dogs. They actually will retrieve in water. That's their preferred place to retrieve, is in very cold water. So they have no nerve endings whatsoever. So trying to get, I've trained a couple, and trying to get them to walk politely on the leash is very difficult. They're probably what prong collars were invented for, because they're very, very strong. So herding dogs, they're not naturally friendly to all other dogs, are they? Or to people. They tend to be pretty, they like who they like. The worst ones of the herding breeds are healers.
Oh, don't say that.
I love healers. I absolutely adore healers, but they are hard.
Even if they're like super wiggly, friendly, little sweet.
No, they're just wonderful dogs. But they're great with people. They are not necessarily great, and they're suspicious of anybody not in their pack, whether it's human or canine. They also. Were you thinking about getting one, or do you think you're? But Fiona's a mix.
Yeah, possibly. She's just everyone. I've had several people say she is really nice for a healer. But she's 6-7 months, so I don't.
Well, she might get a little bit more exclusive as she gets older.
She does like dogs better than people, though.
Oh.
I will say that, which could be an issue. So we work on.
Work on getting her to accept people.
Yeah. No, she likes people, but she's more like dogs. Oh my God.
Usually, what they do as they get older is they just kind of say, "Well, I don't, I like you, okay, but don't get too close."
Yeah.
So you've got a healer, right?
I got a healer male-in-law. Okay.
Oh God. Oh, I'm not.
Yeah.
Mine's here
Every day you're
Yeah. It's just really funny because people always want to know what breed a dog is. If you go to a shelter, then they're always asking, well, how come you don't know? And of course, you're looking at it going. You'll be in a shelter and you'll have a puppy that's this big, and they say, how big is it going to get? And you go, 45 pounds. And then they come back 3 years later and go, this dog is 90 pounds. You got this wrong, and you're like, well, I was just, I was looking at it going, maybe it's going to be big, maybe it's not going to be big. It's funny that people want to know what breed it is, but then they don't take any notice of what the breed temperament is, right? They don't look at.
I didn't know that's what I got. I would have never.
But he's a great dog,
He is.
and you love him,
I do.
right? It's just that the ignorance is bliss.
But he's why she's taking all this fun. So there's that.
Well, as I said last time, the reason most people get into dogs is because they have a dog with a problem. If you don't have a dog with a problem, you think you're perfect. You think, I know how to raise dogs. I have a dog that's perfect. And every trainer has seen people who say, I've had 2 or 3 dogs. I'm very experienced, and come to find out, those were all really nice dogs. So they were good, very, very lucky. Or maybe they're good choosers. Maybe they just know how to choose the dog properly, and so we all should learn from them. Whatever.
Until the next one.
Yeah, and then they'll get a dog, and it'll be a problem. And then and then people do 2 things. Some people blame themselves for everything, and some people blame the dog. And it's almost always a combination of both. So we've talked about this before in classes, the active defense reflex, ADR and PDR. And when you're talking about any kind of aggression or reactivity, then reflexive behavior is not there. Oh.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah, I didn't even. For all I know, the one I just put up here is not the right one either. You might have the latest one. What does your slide say?
Energy, excitement.
Aggression.
Okay, so reflexes. All right, so reflexes. The fight or flight reflex is the one we're all very, very used to. But ADR dogs do what? They respond to a threat with a forward movement, or it could be aggression, or it could just be kind of moving forward. So their reflexes are like having a sharp temper. And I would say the vast majority of reactive dogs are ADR dogs. It does not mean they're aggressive. It means they have a really quick reflex, and their reflex is going to send their energy up, right? Whereas a PDR dog, maybe there's a better way to say this, right? The PDR dog, their reflex is to send their energy down. They're going to go hide someplace. They may go submissive depending on, you know, who it is that's what's causing it. So I'll put this one up for you guys. I'm really sorry that it's not there. But anyway, so they're going to do avoidance, escape, freeze, or tend befriend. They're going to try to do. So when we're working with reflexive dogs or reactive dogs, we're almost always trying to move if we can. We're going to try to help them add the passive defense reflex. They're not going to be able to completely, it's not going to work all the way because they're reflexes. They're reflexes like if you yell if you're trying to open a jar, right? So that's the same kind of thing. And but those are really important. And that, I remember learning years ago that the road to aggression is paved this way. It goes avoidance, anxiety or fear, avoidance, escape, aggression, freeze, aggression, and then anxiety, avoidance, escape, aggression, shut down. That's the 5 things that happen. So energy, excitement, and aggression. So we are our chemistry. They are their chemistry. Epinephrine or adrenaline is released when the body system perceives that there's any kind of danger, and then the dog will go into fight or flight. Again, this is not something that there's any kind of control over intellectually. If you see something like maybe you're arachnophobic or something, and you see an enormous spider, your gut is going to tell you that it's a spider, even if your brain is going, it's 6 feet away, I can't do anything. It can't do anything to me. So it's a really important consideration and it's a hard one for people, you know. So I'm talking to this person yesterday with their German Shepherd who barks and barks and barks. But she, you know, she has a 25 foot comfort zone, and they're constantly putting her, they don't think that should happen. So they're constantly putting her within that. And so we're talking about trying to give her the space that she can have so that she actually can think as opposed to go into reflexive behavior, which is what she does. So when that epinephrine is released, how long do you suppose it takes for that to drop out of the system? It's fairly rapid. Yeah, the epinephrine is. So you're driving along and a car barely misses you. And you get that, right, where the body is just twisting. And for a while, your breaths, you're taking deep breaths, or you're hyperventilating, and you're really thinking, you kind of relive it in your brain and all that kind of stuff. And then it slowly goes away. I would imagine that it goes away faster for people who are more used to taking risks, and it goes away slower for people who are not used to taking risks. But it stays up there for a while, and then you can't get rid of it for a while, and you have all this energy. And then probably 15, 20 minutes later, it's a memory, and you're okay with it. So that's adrenaline, that jolt that you get with that. So your heart rate goes up, your breathing becomes much more rapid, blood goes to the appropriate muscles to facilitate movement, you get ready for fight or flight. In some cases, the dog will actually pee or poop because that's getting ready to go, getting rid of the flotsam and jetsam, the stuff that's not necessary. So everything is ready to go when that epinephrine hits. Even if the dog is not doing anything, it goes, boom, I'm ready, and then they do, and then they go. So then the second chemical hormone that comes into play is cortisol. And cortisol is longer lasting. So it produces energy during fight or flight, but it doesn't actually go away very fast. There we go. So you can go underneath. So what happens with cortisol is that it can stay in the body, active in the body for 3 days. That's a very long time. So when you're talking about shelter dogs, if you know what happens with shelter dogs is they are in a constant state of high cortisol. High cortisol rates are really high. So, but depending on the shelter, if you have a quieter shelter, they're not. If you have a noisy shelter, they are. It can be really bad. And so what then happens is since their baseline is pretty high of cortisol, it only takes this much to get them to get that epinephrine hit and to go over the top. So somebody walking by the kennel can cause that to happen or whatever, which is, can make it hard to be a shelter animal. Everything is hard about being a shelter animal. It's not okay to be one. So you get these long-term problems. Now, there are people who have dogs that fence fight who let the dogs fence fight. None of us, right? But there are people definitely who do. There are people who actually think their dogs get their exercise by fence fighting. Anybody know anybody like that? I've met, you do? Yeah. Yeah, they run up and down the fence so they get all their exercise that way. No problem.
So it puts the dog out at 3 o'clock so the kids can stimulate it.
Really?
Wow.
Okay. And of course, it's not like you can offer them any advice. So, you can't, you really can't. But fence fighting causes adrenaline to rise and to stay rising. The problem with adrenaline is that it is a feel-good hormone. So it feels actually good. It's like going to a scary movie. Why do people like scary movies? So who likes scary movies? Anybody here like scary movies? My daughter loves scary movies. I don't know why, but she's always liked scary movies. I get too scared. Even though I know it's a screen and I know it's not real, I still get too scared. But for a lot of these dogs, life is a scary movie because there's always things going on that scare them. And yet the adrenaline can become they can become an adrenaline addict. So that's your fence fighting person. That dog now is an adrenaline addict. They need that.
It's a 4-year-old dog that's been doing it.
Yeah, it would be really, really hard. It's like the dogs that perch on windows and bark every time anybody goes by. And you would think that they'd be happy to relax, but they like that. So the causes of different kinds of aggression, dog aggression, fear, trauma, again, leash frustration, which is the most popular one or the most common one, bullying, greeting problems, conflict aggression, possession or coveting, same-sex problems, multiple dogs in a household. Well, we're not going to be talking about multi-dogs in a household because we covered that elsewhere, but we'll talk a little bit about the others. So most people with aggression or reactivity, we react by hoping the dog will grow out of it. There have been, can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Well, he's still pretty young. Is he going to grow out of it? Well, he's 3. I think an awful lot of people don't realize that when you're talking about a dog that's going to live 12 or 13 years, 3 is not young. 3 is the beginning of the middle age, So they'll also punish the dog when he acts out. So what happens then, and this is the hard one because this is what most people do. So the dog is walking along, everything is fine, and they are ignoring the dog. And the dog may be walking 6 feet ahead of them on a leash and pulling them and all that kind of stuff, but they're thinking that's okay. And then the dog acts out, and then they get angry with the dog because the dog is acting out. So they start yelling at the dog. And that does it ever fix anything? No, it doesn't ever fix anything. Does it make it worse? Yes. It can make it way worse because, among other things, you're barking with the dog. So we're all barking together, so, which is not nice. But punishment, if dealt with appropriately or given appropriately, can actually suppress a behavior. And this is a really important consideration, because if you have any, if you know anybody who uses a lot of compulsion on dogs, and they really will nail a dog when the dog does what they're not supposed to do, the dog will then stop doing it. Are they getting rid of the behavior? No, they are suppressing it. Is the behavior still there somewhere? Yeah. Is it always a bad thing to suppress it? No. Sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes you can go, you know, I'm sorry, you can't do that now. I know you feel bad. I'm not going to make you feel better. I'm going to make you not do it. So yes, that is appropriate sometimes. But it's not appropriate all the time, and it's certainly not appropriate in times when it's fear-based behavior, because then you're just adding to the fear. So, but also the problem with punishment is that you never tell the dog when you're using punishment, the dog never learns exactly what you would like him to do. This is one of the issues with compulsive training that I don't think people talk about very often, which is when you're compulsively training a dog, and there are lots of people who still do it, so they're using choke chains and pinch collars and all that kind of stuff. And essentially, when you're doing that, you are teaching the dog what he's doing wrong. Everything is geared at what the dog is doing wrong. If they move a little bit, if you're walking and you're doing a heel, they're moving a little bit forward, you pop them. If they move to the side, you pop them. If they move in the back, you pop them. So you're always telling them where they're doing something wrong. When they find the sweet spot, when they find right here, you stop punishing them. You don't necessarily praise them, you just stop punishing them. So the punishment, the suppressing of the behavior is here, 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 and here, and this is what's left. But they never know if that's right or not, so they end up having this kind of frisson of fear all the time. And being a crossover trainer, I can tell you exactly what that felt like when I realized it, you know, because I was working with my Turv, and, you know, she ended up doing, she got her CD, and she, you know, she was a beautifully obedient dog, but I finally realized when she was walking with me at heel, her head was like that. So if she was walking on my left, her head was here. She was trying to get away from me at the same time that she was walking right next to me. She was the dog that I switched over on, and after a while, she completely changed her attitude. She just totally. But it is really interesting, because when you're working with fear, that's what you get. You get fear. So if you're trying to tell a dog to not do something, that's what you're going to get. And again, there are dogs where you're going to have to do that, or you pass them on to somebody who does, and who can, you know. So if you're going to use punishment, and I'm not recommending it, but if you're going to use punishment, then your timing has to be superb. You have to know exactly how much punishment to get to give the dog in order to get the behavior you want. Otherwise, you will cause shutdown. Because the dog will be so highly punished that they will no longer want to do anything for you. And you have to be very, very consistent. And if there's one thing I can say about my clients, they are totally inconsistent. You know, and I can't very well say anything nasty about that because I'm pretty inconsistent myself. And so, you know, you do less harm when you're using positive techniques. It's just that you don't get that feeling of, I got this fixed, I got this under control. My predecessor at the Marine Humane Society, I remember she was dealing with she was the one who hired me to be a dog trainer. Anyway, she was working with a leash reactive dog once, and so somebody brought in their big dog. It was, I think, a Shepherd mix, and the dog had reactivity issues, and so she had me bring out one of my dogs, and then she presented one of my dogs with the reactive dog, and the dog was like barking and lunging and barking at the end of the leash and all that. And so Terry took the dog and she goes, pop, pop, pop. And the dog went, okay. And she said, here, I fixed your dog. Did that fix the dog? No, not even a little bit. That's what we were talking about earlier with ego. That's the trainer ego. If I do it, you know, it's fixed. All she did was hurt the dog. That's all she did. She didn't do anything else. So
See, this was the normal training 40 years ago.
Yeah, that's what you did. And the dogs it's one of the reasons why dogs are such wonderful animals. They put up with it. You know, they didn't have any other choice. Yeah.
We had a dog the other day at the shelter that was really, really well trained and it was an owner surrender. And this dog would do anything, but when you do a recall or trying to get up close to you, it would come up and then it wasn't sure what was gonna happen.
Yeah.
And you could lure it in and get a nice sit, and then it was okay, but someone had obviously trained it, to, it's like anything it did was wrong and it just didn't know
So it didn't know what was right.
what was right.
Yeah. So, I think of the dogs like that as being like children of abusive parents who are told often that they're doing something wrong. And if you're a bad trainer, then you are not consistent about what is wrong. And if that's the case, then you actually, at least with a really good compulsive trainer, they're so straightforward. This is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong, that the dog knows what the rules are. But when you have somebody who's inconsistent, then the dog doesn't know what the rules are, and so then they become really neurotic. They actually kind of go crazy. And you can err too far on the other side as well.
You can't, and it's so hard to pass that on to, I'm not for punishment, but it's so hard to pass that on, that perfect timing to the average dog owner. Like I just see people, I've seen clients where they're just like I've seen dogs walk down the street with prongs and the people are just like, everything the dog does, they're like yanking, the dog sniffs.
I have a feeling they don't understand that dogs actually feel pain.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they really want to be mean to their dogs. I'm hoping they don't want to be mean to their dogs. But I do think that dogs, they're wonderful animals. They put up with anything that we do. It's totally amazing. Right, Aspen, as she lies there on her double bed. Okay, so the other thing that people do is they apply currently acceptable techniques, desensitization and or counter conditioning. We also have many, many problems with those. We have consistency problems with, you've got your dog who's got issues, and so you're trying to do some counter conditioning, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to see every dog that comes by, and so you're always going to blow it. There's always going to be a time when you're not going to get it right. And the consistency thing is often also happens because you might have a husband and a wife who both walk the dog, and the husband does one thing and the wife does something completely different. And then the dog is like walking around being a totally confused animal. Like, I don't know, just let me go. I'd be okay if you just let me go. And most dogs actually would be fine if you let them go. But we don't ever let them go. So, so assessment and modification. Why don't we take a quick break?